Hello, K1 families. It's Miss Richardson here. Nice to see you all again. I am back today to read The Dark, Dark Night to you again. Remember, this is the story with the pond animals, pond and forest animals who think there is a monster in the pond. But then what does it turn out to be? It turns out to be their own shadows. So, The Dark, Dark Night, written by M. Christina Butler, illustrated by Jane Chapman. The Dark, Dark Night. Frog was very excited. All winter he had been asleep under a stone, and now that it was spring, he was on his way back to his pond. On the way, he bumped into Badger and Hedgehog. Then he played leapfrog with Rabbit and Mouse. So he's been hibernating all winter. He's so excited to go swimming in his pond, but he's also really happy to see his friends. So instead of going right to the pond, he stops to talk to his friends and play with his friends. And then what happens? Suddenly, he saw that it was getting dark. So he borrowed a lantern from Mouse, and off he went through the woods to the pond. Woo, woo, the wind blew in the trees. Squeak, squeak went the lantern as it swung from side to side, and the dark was all around. When Frog reached his home, he put the lantern down behind him and was just about to jump in the water when he saw... What's he gonna see? A huge black pond monster with enormous claws coming out of the reeds. Remember, the reeds are these big, tall pieces of grass that sometimes grow in ponds and swamps. Frog grabbed the lantern and hopped as fast as he could through the woods. "There's a huge monster in the pond," he cried. "Are you sure?" laughed Hedgehog. Frog nodded, trembling. "All right," said Hedgehog calmly. "We'll have a look together." "And I'll come too," said Mouse. So Hedgehog doesn't really believe him. They decide to go take a look. And off they went through the woods. Woo, woo, went the wind in the trees. Squeak, squeak, went the lantern. "Wait for me," cried Mouse, and the dark was all around. Soon Hedgehog and Frog reached the pond. "Now," said Hedgehog, "where's this monster?" "There it is!" cried Frog. It was bigger than before, with enormous claws and terrible spikes down its back. "Run, run!" cried Hedgehog. "Pond monster, pond monster!" Oh no, they're so scared. "What's all this?" chuckled Rabbit. "A monster? There's no such thing as monsters." "Come and see for yourself," said Hedgehog, shivering. "All right," said Rabbit, "I will." "I'll never swim in my pond again," sniffed Frog as they set off through the woods. Woo, woo, went the wind in the trees. Squeak, squeak, went the lantern. "Wait for me," cried Mouse, and the dark was all around. It wasn't long before they were back at the pond. Rabbit, Hedgehog, and Frog tiptoed to the water. There it was again, the big pond monster. It was larger than ever. It had enormous claws, terrible spikes down its back, 2 big horns, and wildly waving arms. "Run for your life!" yelled Rabbit, racing back through the woods with Hedgehog and Frog close behind. "What's going on?" said Badger. So they told him all about it. "Come along," Badger said. "I'd like to see this monster of yours." And off they went through the woods. Woo, woo. woo, went the wind in the trees. Squeak, squeak, went the lantern. Wait for me, cried Mouse. And the dark was all around. As they reached the pond, a huge gust of wind came through the trees and blew out all the lanterns. I can't see a monster, said Badger at last. That's because it's too dark, whispered Frog. And there they all stood, waiting in the moonlight for something to happen. What's different this time? Just then, Mouse caught up with the others at last. Yoo-hoo, she shouted, waving her arms from the bank. Badger, Rabbit, Hedgehog, and Frog looked at Mouse, and then they looked at the black shape waving from the reeds. Look at that, said Hedgehog. That's not a pond monster, said Rabbit. That's Mouse's shadow, said Frog. I can't believe it, said Badger. You were running from your own shadows every time. The four friends laughed and laughed and laughed. Hooray, cried Frog. There's no monster after all. And with a huge happy splash, he leaped into his lovely pond at last. So I'm so glad there wasn't really a monster. And last time we read this story, we talked about how when they go to see the pond monster with the badger and they don't see their shadow, it's because there's no light. The wind blew out the candles in their lanterns, so there's no light. They can't see their shadow because there's no light. But the mouse was behind them in the woods. His lantern didn't get blown out, and when he catches up, that's when they figure out what was going on the whole time, that it was actually their shadow. So let's think about how might the story be different if the frog puts his light in a different place. So on this page we can see, here's the frog's lantern, here's the frog, and his shadow is right there. Okay. How would the story be different if the frog put the lantern right here and then stood next to it? What do you think? So we're going to have to think a little bit about shadows and where they show up. I'm going to have to make the room I'm in dark first, so give me a second. Hi friends, so it's a little bit darker in here because I wanted to show you guys how to think about where shadows appear. Okay, so I have the flashlight on my phone turned on so you can see. Okay, I'm going to stand over here. I'm going to point the light that way. Okay, so I'm pointing the light at the wall. If I put my hands in front of it, or my hand in front of it, the light shows up over there. That's because here's the light. My hand is blocking the light, and it's making the shadow on the wall. Okay. If I turn my light this way, though, and shine it over there, now you guys can't see the shadow because it's actually over here. I'm blocking the light with my hand, and it's making a shadow over here. You guys can't see it. If I turn the light up, now my shadow is on the ceiling. If I turn my light down, now my shadow is on the floor. Okay? So where your light is, which way it's pointing, and where you are blocking the light all impacts where your shadow shows up. So in the case of the frog, let's take a look. Okay? So we can see here's the light, here's the frog. So the light's here, the frog is blocking the light, and the shadow shows up here. But if the frog had put the lantern right here and stood next to it, his shadow would have been back here, and he would not have thought it was a monster. He probably wouldn't have even noticed it because it wouldn't have been in front of him. And then the whole story would be completely different. It wouldn't have really ever happened because if he didn't see a shadow, he wouldn't have thought there was a monster. So what I want you to do is the next time there's a sunny day, I want you to go outside. I want you to notice where the sun is and where your shadow is, and how the location of your shadow changes depending on where the sun is in the sky and where your body is. Okay? And you can also do the same thing with a flashlight. Get a flashlight, get some toys, shine the flashlight on the toys to see where the shadow is, and see how if you go to the other side of your toy and shine the flashlight, it actually changes where the shadow is. A shadow happens when you block the light, but when you change where the light is or where the object that's blocking it is, it actually changes where the shadow appears. All right, so have some fun playing with lights and shadows and seeing where the shadows show up. The next story we're going to read together has some more shadows in it, and this story is going to make us think about what makes shadows big or small. All right, so see you guys again soon.